You have met this person. Drives a 10-year-old car, wears faded clothes, orders the cheapest thing on the menu, lives in a modest house in an ordinary neighborhood, complains about prices like everyone else. And then you find out they are worth $40 million. This is not rare. It is not eccentric. It is a pattern, deliberate, consistent, and psychologically loaded, that repeats across every culture and every level of genuine wealth. Carl Jung would not be surprised by it for a single second. Today, we go into exactly why. 1. The moment money changes everything. Most people believe that getting rich solves problems. And it does. Certain ones. The anxiety of not being able to pay rent, the exhaustion of scarcity, the specific, grinding stress of not having enough. These are real problems. Money solves them. But it creates something nobody warns you about. The moment significant wealth becomes known, not imagined, not rumored, but known, something shifts in every relationship you have. People become more agreeable, more accommodating, more careful, more likely to laugh at things that aren't funny, more likely to support ideas that don't deserve support, more likely to be available, enthusiastic, and warm in ways that track, with uncomfortable precision, the size of the number. And the wealthy person, often suddenly, sometimes gradually, begins to feel something that the aspiration industry never mentioned. They cannot trust what they are receiving. Is this genuine affection or strategic positioning? Is this honest feedback or managed impression? Is this person here because of who I am or because of what I have? These questions arrive, and they do not leave. Jung called this the collapse of the persona, the social mask that worked before money, the relatively authentic self-presentation that produced genuine connection, suddenly becomes inadequate. Because the world is no longer responding to the person, it is responding to the resource. And the person, now inseparable in everyone's perception from what they have, begins the search for a way to be seen without it. The poor performance begins here, not as deception, as survival. 2. The shadow that wealth creates. Here is what nobody in the financial world talks about. Significant wealth creates a shadow. Not metaphorically, in Jung's precise clinical sense. The shadow, everything suppressed and denied because it is incompatible with the conscious self-image, accumulates around wealth in specific and predictable ways. The guilt of having significantly more than others, not the performed guilt. The real, quiet, 3 a.m. guilt of knowing the distribution was not entirely merit, that luck, birth, timing, and circumstance played roles that the success narrative conveniently minimizes. The grief of relationships that changed when the money arrived. That became, in some cases, transactions where they used to be genuine encounters. The fear, rarely spoken, occasionally erupting, that without the money, the person underneath might not be particularly interesting. That the wealth is not something they have, that it has become something they are. And if it disappeared, what would remain? All of this goes into the shadow, suppressed, unexamined, quietly accumulating beneath the surface of the successful life. And the shadow, as Jung observed across decades of clinical work, always finds expression. For the wealthy person, one of its most consistent expressions is the performance of not having. The deliberate presentation of ordinariness is not simply a strategy for avoiding unwanted attention. It is the shadow trying to return to a self that existed before the money made the self invisible. 3. What Veblen saw and what he missed. In 1899, the economist Thorstein Veblen gave the world a concept it immediately recognized: conspicuous consumption. The display of wealth through visible goods and experiences. The expensive car, the address, the watch, the vacation, as a form of social signaling. Veblen was right. This mechanism is real, and it is everywhere. But he missed the equal and opposite phenomenon: conspicuous non-consumption. The deliberate, visible, carefully maintained performance of not having. The billionaire in the decade-old car is not simply being practical. He is signaling. Not wealth, something more powerful than wealth. Security. The specific psychological signal of a person so established in their own identity that display is simply no longer interesting. This signal, the signal of genuine self-sufficiency, is one of the most attractive and least available qualities in human social life. Everyone recognizes it. Almost nobody has it. Because it cannot be purchased, it can only be built. And the wealthy person performing poverty is, in many cases, attempting to purchase what can only be built. Attempting to acquire through behavior what can only be produced through genuine interior development. The performance is the shortcut. The shortcut doesn't work, but it reveals, with extraordinary clarity, what the person is actually searching for. 4. The inherited wealth problem. The dynamic becomes more complex and psychologically more dangerous in the specific case of inherited wealth. The person who built the wealth has at least the narrative of the building, the story of effort, of risk, of something created from something smaller. However complicated their relationship with what they built, they have the internal authority of having made something real. The person who inherited it has no such narrative. They arrived into a situation not of their making, with resources not of their earning, into a life shaped by something they did not choose and cannot claim full responsibility for. And this creates a specific psychological crisis that Jung would recognize immediately. Because genuine identity, stable, self-authored, internally grounded identity, requires the experience of becoming something through your own encounter with genuine difficulty, of facing real challenge and discovering, through the facing, what you are actually made of. The inherited wealth person is often denied this experience at its most fundamental level. The challenge that would have built the character is removed before it arrives. The struggle that would have produced the self-knowledge is eliminated by the cushion before it can teach anything. And the person is left with the resources, and the question that the resources cannot answer. If I had nothing, would I be anything? The performance of poverty is the attempt to find out, not as philosophy, as a genuine, felt need to encounter the self without the protection, to discover whether, stripped of everything the inheritance provided, there is a person underneath worth knowing. 5. The difference between performing and transcending. This is where the psychology becomes most precise, because there are two completely different realities hiding behind the same external behavior. The wealthy person who performs poverty, and the wealthy person who has genuinely transcended the need for display. From the outside, identical. Same modest car, same simple clothes, same apparent indifference to status markers. Inside, completely different. The performer is working. The simplicity is deliberate, effortful, maintained through the same energy that conspicuous display requires, just directed differently. Every choice about what to show and what to conceal is a calculation. The persona of ordinariness requires as much management as the persona of success. The genuinely transcendent person is not working at all. They drive the old car because they have genuinely stopped caring what the car communicates. They wear the simple clothes because the question of what the clothes signal stopped being interesting somewhere in the long process of building a real interior life. Jung would call the first persona construction. He would call the second individuation. The same behavior, entirely different foundations. And the difference is visible, not in what they do, but in how they receive other people's perception of them. The performer is disturbed when someone sees through the performance. The genuinely transcendent person is completely unbothered. Because the performer still needs the performance to work. The transcendent person has already found what the performance was pretending to have found. The self that doesn't need the signal, because it no longer has any doubt about what it is. 6. Why genuine connection becomes the scarcest luxury. There is one thing that significant money structurally cannot buy, and the wealthiest people in the world will tell you this. In the unguarded moments, when the business conversation is over and something more honest begins. The certainty that the people around them are actually there, not positioning, not managing, not present because of what might be available through proximity. Actually, genuinely, freely there. This certainty, this specific, irreplaceable experience of genuine human presence without agenda, becomes, at high levels of wealth, rarer than almost any other resource. Because wealth changes the incentive structure of every relationship. And once you know this, once you have experienced it enough times to no longer be able to pretend otherwise, the way you engage with people fundamentally shifts. You test, often unconsciously. The poor performance is one form of the test. Remove the visible signal, present as ordinary, and see who shows up, and how, when what you have is not visible. The test is not cynical, it is desperate. The search for the relationship that would exist regardless. For the person who sees you, not the account, not the address, not the access you represent, but you. And this search, which the performance is designed to enable, reveals something Jung spent his entire career documenting. The need to be genuinely seen is not a luxury. It is the most fundamental human requirement. Present at every level of material circumstance. Unsatisfied at most of them. And almost never solved by the thing most people believe will solve it. 7. What the real wealth actually is. Jung made a distinction throughout his career that the financial world has never known what to do with. The distinction between what a person has and who a person is. Most people, including most wealthy people, live as though these are the same thing. As though accumulation is self-development. As though the growth of the resource is the growth of the person. This confusion, quiet, pervasive, and psychologically devastating, is the source of most of the suffering that significant wealth produces. Because the self that is built on what it has is always fragile. Vulnerable to loss, to market movement, to the opinion of others, to the constant, exhausting maintenance of the resource base that the identity depends on. The real wealth, in Jung's framework, is the self that exists completely independently of what it has. The identity that does not require the resource to feel valid. The presence that does not need the display to feel real. The person who is the same in their essential quality, in their genuine capacity for relationship, whether the account has 40 million in it or nothing. This is what the wealthy person performing poverty is actually searching for. Not the experience of poverty itself. The experience of a self that is independent of its wealth. Of discovering, through the removal of the signal, whether there is something underneath it that holds. The search is real. The method is sometimes confused. But what is being sought is the most valuable thing available to any human being. The self that cannot be taken. The identity that does not live in the account. The person who would remain interesting, real, genuinely present, if every external marker of success were removed tomorrow. Jung would say, this person, once built, never needs to perform poverty, because they have already found what the performance was looking for. 8. The 7 things this pattern reveals about all of us. Not just the wealthy, all of us. First, the performance of not having is just as constructed as the performance of having. The wealthy person who drives the old car and the person who buys the car they cannot afford are making the same move. Both are using material signals to communicate something about identity. Both are trying to be seen in a particular way. The direction is opposite. The mechanism is identical. Second, identity and possession are confused at every level of material circumstance. This is not a wealth problem. It is a human problem. What I have and who I am become entangled early in life and remain entangled throughout most of it. The wealthy person's confusion is simply more visible because the gap between the having and the being is wider. Third, genuine connection is the scarcest resource at every level. The billionaire who cannot trust his relationships and the person with nothing who cannot trust theirs are experiencing the same fundamental scarcity. The form is different. The hunger is identical. Fourth, the need to be seen accurately is universal and almost universally unmet. To be seen as you actually are, not as what you produce, not as what you can provide, not as what you represent, is one of the deepest human needs and one of the least reliably available experiences at any level of wealth. Fifth, every persona costs energy. Whether you are performing wealth or performing poverty, success or struggle, the maintenance requires something. The real economy is not the energy spent on display. It is the energy recovered when you finally stop. Sixth, what people actually want from wealth is never what they say they want. Security, options, legacy. These are the reasonable answers. Underneath them, the answer is always the same. To matter, to be genuinely known, to feel that their presence was real and was received as real. Money does not provide this. The performance of not having money does not provide this. Only the interior work provides this. Seventh, the person underneath the wealth is the only thing worth knowing. Always, without exception, what they survived, what they built in themselves that the money did not build for them, what they understand about life that resources could not teach and could not protect them from having to learn. This is what makes a human being interesting, not the number, the person the number could not make and could not replace. 9. The final truth. Jung wrote something that lands differently once you have sat with this subject long enough. He wrote that the most important question any human being can ask is not what they have. It is who they are when they have nothing to hide behind. The wealthy person performing poverty is asking this question, imperfectly, sometimes confusedly, sometimes dishonestly, but asking it. And it is, underneath all the complexity of the behavior, the right question. Not because poverty is virtuous, not because wealth is shameful, but because the self that requires the signal, in any direction, to feel real, is always, structurally, a self in crisis. And the self that requires nothing to feel real, that is the same in the expensive restaurant and the cheap one, the same in the new car and the old one, the same when the room knows what it has and when it doesn't. That self is not performing anything. It has simply arrived at the place that the performance was always trying to reach. The experience of being genuinely, completely, unmistakably itself, without props, without signals, without the exhausting maintenance of a persona designed to manage what other people think. Just, present, real, here. The wealthy person pretending to be poor is not confused about money. They are searching for the same thing every human being is searching for. At every level of material circumstance, through every performance they maintain, through every mask they wear, and every signal they send, and every test they run on the people around them. The experience of being known, actually, genuinely, completely known, by at least one other person. And most importantly, by themselves. If this reached something in you, some recognition of the performance you have been maintaining, in whatever direction, at whatever level of circumstance, that recognition is the beginning of the only search that matters. If you want more content on Carl Jung's psychology, the architecture of genuine identity, shadow work, and the deep philosophy of what makes a human life real, subscribe now. Because the most important thing you will ever have is not in any account. It is the self that would remain if the account were emptied. And most people spend their entire lives accumulating everything, except that.